This week, PlugShare added a filter icon for Walmart Energy. The Rivian Adventure Network debuted their Southampton Outpost. And Electrify America opened a 20-stall station in downtown Santa Monica, California. Let's get into it. So I'm here at my local Rivian Adventure Network station in northern Charlotte near the North Lake Mall. The reason I am is last week I kind of in passing mentioned a 6-stall station in New York, and I didn't realize it wasn't a 6-stall station in New York. It's the 6-stall station in New York in the Southamptons. It's one of the very few select Outpost stations that Rivian opened. And I didn't notice until later on in the weekend I started watching YouTubers who were doing videos from the brand new Outpost in Southampton, and I was definitely scolding myself in inner dialogue for missing that one, but I feel as though it's worthy enough in order to call out that a new Rivian Adventure Network Outpost has now been opened. The other two are at Joshua Tree and Yosemite, the third one being in Southamptons. And as I mentioned, several YouTubers made videos of it. It's a very nice location for people who are not aware of the Outpost program. It's locations where there's a Rivian Adventure Network charging station like this, but they also have an attached facility run by Rivian staff that has clean restrooms. You can get some free coffee. Vending is inside, and Rivian staff is there. You can get Rivian's garb, or I don't want to call it swag because it's not free, but you have to go in and you can get t-shirts and hats and things like that. So they debuted their third Outpost. Apparently it's going to be a thing. And if you want to see a interview with the head of Rivian Charging, Jose, who runs the Rivian Tracker YouTube channel, was able to secure an interview with the head of Rivian Charging. So be sure to go over to his channel and take a look at that video. It was very interesting to hear directly from the people running this network what their thoughts are with the whole upgrade to version 1.5, the swap out of NACs, and many other things. So it's a very interesting video. Recommend going and taking a look at that. Next, pilot Flying J was spotted with another 6-stall station. The original one on Interstate 75 in Wildwood, Florida, right where Interstate 75 and the Sunshine State Parkway split, has opened. But a second station now has been spotted under construction in Yuma, Arizona, clear across the other side of the country. So it's, in my mind, confirming that Pilot is pivoting to a larger stall count for their stations. It's not just a one and done. There's method to their madness. They seem to be increasing. I don't know if it's across the board or in just select locations, but they're definitely introducing larger stall count stations into their mix now, which never used to be the case. I've been watching them for 2 years, and that never was the case. About a month ago on this series, I interviewed Sahuri Asha from the Houston-based company called Connected America. And he was mentioning many stations getting ready to open, and one has been spotted near Houston, to the south of Houston. There is now a very large Connected America station spotted soon to open, and it's got an undetermined number of stall counts, but it's probably about a dozen, maybe 15 stalls. And they're under canopies, so they're definitely following through with what they are saying they were going to do with this whole concept of a attendantless convenience store with attached amenities and a very nice charging station with an upscale user-focused experience. So that was really encouraging to see that pop into PlugShare this past week. Next, with NEVI sending about $5 billion southbound to the States starting this week, I felt as though we should bring in someone who could help kind of frame what this all means to us. Let's go to Steve from the Plug and Play YouTube channel.
So as I mentioned, midweek, I did an update on the NEVI getting rebooted as an out-of-spec video drop, and I neglected to mention Alan Yates was the one who provided me that feed. And while I was reading it after he sent it to me, Alan Yates of Love's EV charging tracking fame, I was having a hard time processing what I was looking at, because NEVI went from being completely annihilated, obliterated, brought down to ash, to being fully funded and on an accelerated timeline, all in the space of one letter getting released. And I had a hard time processing it. So I reached out to the person who I think could help frame this better for us than anyone else, Steve at Plug and Play EV. So Steve, thanks so much for coming on this evening.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And if we could just very briefly, so I mean, it's been a while since NEVI's been on the shelf, and just like any book that you want to pick back up again, you want to back up a chapter or two just to remember where you were. How many NEVI stations do we think are actually, let's say, every single NEVI station that we know of, or that was, I don't even know, that got into the program before the musical chair game stopped? If all those were built, how many stations are we actually talking about here?
If the awards came through and they were actually turned into real stations, you'd be looking at around 1,000 based on what had been allocated so far to the point of being paused.
And help my memory, because there were many states that haven't even gotten to the point of, and I think the term was RFPing.
Yeah, going out to for a request for proposal. So basically soliciting various charging vendors for sites that they would like to put in, and then scoring them, and maybe getting to the awards state further along the track.
So conceivably, they were being belligerent in like Florida and a few other states. Mississippi, I think, was another one of the difficult children in the classroom. And let's just say hypothetically, now that it's a Republican administration encouraging them to go forward, that they actually take these, it could be more than 1,000. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the rounds of awards, most states had only gotten to their first one, if that. A lot of them were still in the process. Even some of the progressive states, Washington was still quite far behind the ball, and California wasn't really progressing too hard, as it has kind of made up some time in the meantime here. But essentially, yeah, you're looking at most states had a couple of rounds of awards tops. Some had a couple of subsequent rounds, but basically maybe the best case scenario is high double digits for awards being out there. I think Texas was out ahead with closing in on about 100 awards that it put, but talking about only a few sites being built in most states.
Yeah, as I recall, Ohio was the one who drew blood first and got the first NEVI station in, but there was also the round two. So as you say, there were multiple rounds. So help me out here. Is what happened this week going to be funding just the round one NEVI, or is this like the whole enchilada, the entire NEVI program that's getting funded?
It should be everything. There are still some kind of caveats that some court decisions that could come along, or some potential rescissions packages if they really wanted to try again. But from the tone of the memo and the Federal Highways Agency kind of guidance that we've seen since all this came out last week or earlier this week in some cases with the guidance, we should be full steam ahead. It looks like they've given up the ghost of trying to put this back in the bottle and are just kind of grudgingly being made to push the entire program. So it's 5 years of funding, and we're in the fourth year now. So the final year that could have potentially been called back was 2026 financial year, and it looks like that even will be going out to the states unless we get further developments in the courts in future.
Yeah, that's right. And so the 14 state alliance that did the federal court case, at one point we were thinking that just funds were going to be dispersed to them, but this is every state out there who is a state. So all, as I believe you commonly reference 52 states, because District of Columbia and Puerto Rico as well are entitled now to the funds that have been allocated to them for this program. Is that a fair assessment from your understanding?
Yeah, it's important to state, as you said, that there are some states that were laggards even when the money was kind of flowing freely and this program was being celebrated, so wouldn't necessarily expect them, although they have been given the green light to go ahead with this from the current administration, which is a Republican administration, obviously. That may not mean that they still want to spend that money. There's a lot of kind of vagaries ahead, because if that money isn't spent by certain states, it could go back into the overall pot and then be distributed to the states who do want to spend it. So maybe there's a case of, the lesser of two evils for those states is actually putting in charges rather than Florida's money going to New York, and that being even more kind of grimacing to EV charging.
It would really be an exercise in belligerence if, as a governor of a state, you have both a Democrat and Republican administration in the White House telling you to spend some money and you're refusing to. That, if that happens, that'll really be something in the political history books to look back upon. But I understand. So the new guidance wording, I did read over it kind of briefly. Do you think in the claim of the Transportation Secretary, Secretary Duffy, was that this was going to fix the NEVI program, streamline it, and actually accelerate the implementation of these electric vehicle charging stations? Do you think that is likely going to occur as a result of the amended guidance, or do you think that's more or less just hyperbole?
Well, the guidance itself was supposed to come out in the spring, so they were late on their own deadline to that. And it
Good
seemed
point.
to be because they wanted the executive order to see how much, maybe if they'd have won in court, that would have been the end of it and we'd have never heard guidance again. But this seems to be something of a grudging, just the wording of it and the way it's kind of positioned is a little bit partisan, so it does seem to be grudging. But the guidance itself is, there are some things that could remove some of the red tape. Certainly, they're removing the 50-mile every station being within 50 miles or less requirement, which in some ways could be good, some ways could be bad. But there are a lot of states that have, the large kind of your North Dakota, South Dakota, big expanses, Texas, where there are sections where there's just nothing, there's not even, gas stations in those kind of 70, 80-mile stretches. So they could, in the previous plans, request exemptions from that 50-mile requirement. So it wasn't even like something that was set in stone, but this may help them move a little bit faster on that. And also it could make it a little bit easier for them to qualify as fully built out, which we talked about it being previously every 50 miles having a station along the designated AFC alternative fuels corridors. So if they now don't have to qualify quite as strictly to that and get sign off from the FHWA, that does mean that they could potentially start spending some of the money that they've got in more rural areas, more areas where there are, less difficulties trying to get those travel corridors covered. The biggest thing they seemed to go after was the kind of equity Justice 40 requirements, which are, a lot of DEI that's been really kind of in the crosshairs of the administration. So there's a lot of that being swept away, which could, have some side benefits of making it easier to find sites and deploy sites. But in general, these states have already made their plans. They had to have their overall plans submitted in 2022. Then they update them every year. That's what this guidance was kind of delaying them to get these plans out there. And, the updated plans are essentially, this is what we've built, this is where we're going to build next year. And it's usually a kind of rubber stamp. So a lot of the work's been done already. And the red tape that this supposedly clears doesn't really, it could help in certain instances, but it's not a huge, it's not going to accelerate NEVI. It still takes 12 to 18 months to build a station in most cases. So you're not going to get more shovels in the ground that way much more quickly.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like you say, I recently reviewed the North Carolina plan for a different reason prior to this announcement. And that plan is already in place. If they were going to go reinvent the wheel and come up with a new plan, it would delay. But I think most states that already have stations selected that are not actually funded yet, and we're waiting for that clarification, are very likely just going to go with the plan in hand instead of trying to reopen new RFPs and start from scratch again. But then there's other states like Indiana. I don't know if you saw what happened in Indiana. They basically looked at their NEVI sites and they're like, well, these aren't going to happen. So they went with something called Go Indiana or Go
EV Indiana.
Yeah, Go EV. Thank you. Yes, sir. And so they just funded a whole bunch of stations in that, which basically overlapped a lot of their NEVI awards. So those are now off the table. So I think in the case of Indiana, either they're going to double fund stations and, get more stalls, or they're going to have to go back to new RFPs or something. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen there. But
it'll be interesting to see, because the Go EV Indiana program specifically, they pulled back some of the NEVI, so it required 2 ports, and they had slightly lower power levels. So there's potentially some lesser stations going in there if they wanted to go NEVI again. So maybe they'll combine the two, as you say, and make them larger stations, or maybe revisit the entire awards now that they can take the funding again. But it's going to be interesting to see how the states go back on themselves to make use of that NEVI funding that's now flowing again.
And we have 52 chefs in the kitchen again. So
well, yeah, you'd hope so. But again, how many of those chefs are going to stick a finger up at the funding in general? We'll see. But
some will grab it with gusto, and others will just kind of try to mull it over a little bit longer. But we'll see how this all plays out. Very exciting times. But again, rewinding the tape, can you tell us at last sounding which CPOs we're poised to gain either the most stations or the most money or both. And I don't really know if there's a way of delineating between those two because it's a bit murky between money and stations. I would imagine
Yes.
that's hard to track.
In terms of site awards, it was Francis Energy on top for a long time. They're still deploying quite a few stations across the country as part of both NEVI and their own programs, so they were way out in front. Tesla is second in terms of the sheer number of sites, but because they come in so much cheaper, the average site is roughly around 668,000. That's a site award, so that could be 80% of the total cost of the station, but that's roughly where most of the vendors, including Francis, come in, and then Tesla typically comes in about half that probably. So they're building much cheaper sites for Tesla. So the awards that they get, although they have more sites, is they're getting less money than someone like Love's in third place, who has fewer site awards but is going to spend more money to build them. But again, with the Love's, you get a canopy and the Omniports and all that.
Omniports, yeah.
Maybe that's the way to spend money. I don't know, but certainly in terms of those top three, it's Francis, Tesla, and Love's.
Well, pulling the view back out again to a big picture view, when you're talking 1,000 stations, this is nothing to sneeze at. This is a major investment in EV infrastructure right at a time where there's multiple other players throwing their hat in the ring, and it's just more fuel to the fire. So it is truly refreshing to see again an additional injection of funds into electric vehicle charging. We're kind of looking at a bit of a flatlining for multiple different reasons of the sale of electric vehicles, but there's no denying that electric vehicle charging is still accelerating at a frightening pace, and this just adds to it. I don't know if you're of a similar perspective. I definitely appreciate you tracking NEVI, because this is a complicated animal in order to keep your arms around, I would have to imagine. But I don't know if you're seeing the same perspective that I am, that DC fast charging right now is far and away unequivocally answering that the country light duty transportation is going electric. At least that's every indication I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good point to end it on, really, is that IONNA, probably by the time you have this live, will have activated their first NEVI-funded station in Fruita in Colorado. And
that's right.
that's one of what they've got 21, 22 sites at the moment, and their portfolio is in the pipeline something like 100. So yes, they will strike here and there where they can get some NEVI funds in the right locations, but the private investment picture is much, much wider. Same with Pilot Flying J. I think they're on something like 29, 30 sites that have got NEVI funding, but as you track, they're closing in on 200 nationwide. So you can see, although it's welcome funding, it's a drop in the ocean compared to what private investment is pushing for the wider EV infrastructure in the United States.
Well, the more the merrier, and it seems to keep getting merrier and merrier and merrier. Steve, thank you so much for coming back on to Out of Spec Bits and helping put this into perspective for us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Steve, for helping to put the puzzle pieces together for what we can expect with NEVI going forward in the NEVI world. Definitely a very abrupt change in direction with NEVI. So here we are with even more people showing up to the DC Fast Charger party. Next, CPO Blink sometimes gets some shade thrown on them, but they did a very noble station build in Western Chicago that opened this past week called the Chicago Power Up Plaza in an underserved community in the western portion of the metropolitan area. It has, I think it's 16 stalls, and the before and after pictures look as though they actually purchased the land too, which is out of character for Blink, but apparently they wanted to put in a large charging station in this area. And what I found with EVgo stations, they tend to favor lower income neighborhoods for their stations. And you would think that's counterintuitive because they'd be prone to vandalism and whatnot. But what I found is when they put in electric vehicle charging stations in lower income neighborhoods, they do not get vandalized. They actually become like an asset for the community. And the local populations kind of keep it protected, is what it feels like. Every time I go to a station in a lower income area, I always feel safe. The locals are always very welcoming, and that might not be the case away from the station. And sometimes there's security around and whatnot if necessary, but it seems to be a good model, because if you're lower income and just trying to eke out a living and trying to figure out a way to prosper, one of the ways you could cut your expenses is by going electric, and having these electric vehicle charging stations in central areas of underserved communities is a helpful boost and also a good business model as well for higher utilization stations. So it's really encouraging to see Blink open that station where they did. And top of the line, not just a few stalls, they went full over a dozen stalls, and they built it from the ground up, purchased their land and everything. So that was exciting to see. The Tesla Supercharger network in Stamford, Connecticut, indoor to the Stamford Town Center Shopping Center parking garage, has a really nice looking station, and it showed up in the Alternative Fuels Data Center database as 48 stalls, but if you were on my private channel, commented that that is what the permit was for, but actually only 24 stalls got installed. And I've heard that that parking garage is actually a pay per park, so you got to pay to get in there. So I'm thinking perhaps what they did is they put 24 stalls in the parking garage where you have to pay to get in, but they're also going to put 24 more stalls outside in some form of open area, exposed to the elements, but free to park, if I had to guess. I'm not sure, but that's my speculation at this time. Right now, only 24 of those stalls are available, and all of them are inside the parking garage. Next, as I mentioned, Walmart got their own filter icon in PlugShare. I'm not quite sure how PlugShare determines whether or not a CPO is qualifying for a filter icon or not, but Walmart Energy now has their own filter icon, and when you filter on it, you can see quite a few stations, but surprisingly, they're all west of the Mississippi River. There are no stations currently on PlugShare with Walmart Energy filters east of the Mississippi River. And if you're not aware of this build, it could be one of the largest ones in the country once it starts getting its steam ramped up. Multiple YouTubers are tracking it. Tom Malogny from the State of Charge and Landon from the Arkansas E-Traveler are two of note who have their eyes closely watching the Walmart, and now they have their own PlugShare filter icon. So if we want to watch it from afar, we could do so by looking at PlugShare, and hopefully that will be updated either by the community or by Walmart themselves going forward, and it'll be an easy way to spot them, because I really think there's going to be an explosion. The number of permits that are getting spotted is really significant, and I'm pretty sure we're going to start to see Walmart stations popping up like tulips in the springtime here pretty soon. IONNA opened 2 new rechargeries. I think I mentioned Daytona Beach last time, but it's officially opened, and also Grand Prairie, Texas just recently opened. And just there's 2 Grand Prairie rechargeries. There's Grand Prairie North and Grand Prairie South. This is the southern one that opened. The northern one had already been opened, but this is the southern one that is now opened as well. Circle K has a process where they continually open stations without really slowing down, but they only update the Alternative Fuels Data Center database periodically. And they did so this past week. There were 8 new stations listed. Let me go over those really quickly. Page, Arizona; Phoenix, Arizona; Escondido, California; Denver, Colorado; St. Petersburg, Florida; San Antonio, Texas; Ulysses, Texas; and Summerland, British Columbia. All those are newly added to the Circle K electric vehicle charging station portfolio. Lastly, Electrify America opened a 10-stall station in Santa Monica. And what's unique about this, they actually issued a press release about it, and I'm going to read it here in just a second in full because I think it's worth going through, is that Electrify America apparently purchased the land, which is very unusual for them. There are no attached facilities here. There's also indication that a similar type of build in Santa Barbara, which is to the north of Santa Monica, also having 20 stalls, and also in a plot of land that Electrify America is going to purchase and build on. Looks like in that one in Santa Barbara, there's actually going to be some kind of canopy structures over them. In Santa Monica, there are no canopies over the chargers, but it is apparently in an area of California that's very walkable, and there's apparently amenities in downtown Santa Monica that are very close by. I haven't really scoped it out too closely on Google Maps or anything, but that's what I'm hearing from my viewers. So a marquee location is coming to the Electrify America portfolio as well. let me just click on this really quickly. I'll read through it. There's also some other stations that recently opened in Electrify America. They had a very good week. But let's go through the Santa Monica press release. August 12th, Electrify America announced the opening of its first charging station in Santa Monica, California, designed to meet the region's growing demand for accessible and hyperfast public electric vehicle charging. The new station features 20 hyperfast chargers capable of speeds up to 350 kilowatts, fast enough to add up to 20 miles of driving range per minute for capable EVs designed to accept the high-powered charging. Electrify America operates the largest open network of 350 kilowatt capable chargers in the U.S., purpose-built for today's high-voltage EVs. The new station is located near the I-10 freeway. Quote, "Our station in Santa Monica represents where EV charging is headed," says Robert Barossa, President and CEO of Electrify America. "We're focused on expanding where drivers need us most and building larger stations with more hyperfast chargers. It's about creating a network that works seamlessly, far more people and powering their journeys across North America. Seamlessly for more people and powering their journeys across North America. With more than 1,000 stations, over 5,000 chargers in operation across North America, Electrify America is continuing to scale its infrastructure to meet customer demand. Since launching its first 350 kilowatt capable charger in 2018 and enabling plug-in chargers since 2020, the company remains focused on future-proofing the network by testing new equipment in the technology campus and building the large stations to support the next generation of EVs. The Santa Monica station is part of the Electrify America holistic approach to delivering customer-first charging experience through larger stations with more chargers, next-generation technology, and focus on accessibility. And as I said, there were additional stations that opened this week. There was a 10-stall station in San Matica, California, 6 stalls in East Windsor, New Jersey, Morristown, New Jersey, Lansdowne, Maryland, and at an IKEA in Renton, Washington. Thanks for watching.